Eraserhead was the 1977 feature debut of David Lynch, a man who I not only regard as the master of nightmare cinema, but a genuine revolutionary responsible in many respects for finally bringing experimental and alternative cinema to a mainstream audience. His unusual style and attitude towards both filmmaking and its audience is frankly groundbreaking, and that's an understatement. So if you're watching this to hear whether it's worth your time or not checking this film out, stop my video right now and go and watch Eraserhead. Right now. No, seriously. This film is quite unlike anything you will ever see and is one of the finest examples of a film being true art that I have ever seen. Eraserhead is a deeply unsettling experience, in many ways much more shocking than many horror films of the time, and certainly much more scarring. Horror films tend to scare you in the moment, but Eraserhead, like most of Lynch's films, create terrifying images in your mind that simply will not leave. Even some 10 years since I first sat down to watch this production, there'll still be completely random times where images from this film will randomly pop into my mind and deeply disturb me. It's unlike anything I can really explain, and no other filmmaker has had quite the same impact on me as Lynch and Eraserhead have. And the strangest part is that this film almost never existed at all. Lynch submitted a short, The Alphabet, an equally terrifying experience I can assure you, to a film financing committee, who agreed to fund the project believing it to be a roughly 30-minute long short film based on its 20 to 30 page script. From there, Lynch spent 4 years struggling in production on this feature, filming in studios after midnight and keeping the production afloat by running a paper round and promising the cast and crew shares in the film's success. He would infrequently ask his friends and family for loans to keep the film alive, and his wife would often cook meals for the cast and crew to keep them fed, and at one point Lynch even ended up sleeping on the set to help maximise his time and keep costs down. This was an absolute labour of love for Lynch, and with its success he was catapulted into the limelight of the mainstream film industry. The plot is really secondary to the actual point of this film. Eraserhead isn't here to give you a well-crafted and plotted narrative. It's more designed around the concept of making you feel something in the same way that a good painting is. This film is an experience, and everybody who watches it will come away with a different experience of what the film is about. Some will judge it quite literally as a comment on fatherhood, which is what it's widely regarded to be about. Lynch himself was coping with the birth of his first child around this time, and what plot there is in this production would almost certainly lend itself to that belief. There's plenty to be interpreted out of this production, with lots of symbolism and absurdism thrown into the mix to create this unnatural, dream, nightmare-esque world. I'll get the technical aspects of this film out of the way from the start, simply because I don't personally see them as important as the meaning of this film. Starting with the lighting, which is quite simply some of the best I've ever seen in any feature film in my lifetime. It's breathtaking, unique, striking and dynamic. It really pushes the boundaries of what cinema at the time had done with the field and plays a tremendously large part in setting the tone and style of this production in such a way that it simply wouldn't be a shadow of itself if it wasn't for this superb aspect. The cinematography is astounding as well, absolutely revolutionary for its time, mixing some quite stunning set pieces and groundbreaking experimentation with a format that was so ahead of its time they would have only really have begun to have crept into the mainstream some 30 years later. The direction takes a frankly experimental approach as well. It all feels rather lucid and unreal, and when it's coupled with the cinematography really creates a tonally unusual environment that's both mysterious and deeply unpleasant, but at the same time totally engrossing. It's hard to tell what's going to happen next, and you're deeply drawn into hanging around to see where it goes. The sound design is incredible as well, with an absolute wall of sound vibe that completely blows out the spectrum. This is not a subtle soundtrack, with its echoey, industrialised blasting bringing a tremendously oppressive framing to this incredibly otherworldly piece. Tonally, the film plays between three different aspects. A third of this production is surreal nightmare fuel, a third of it is trying to keep planted in some kind of a reality, and the third of it's deadpan macabre comedy. Lynch's humour is another interesting element of not only this film but of his oeuvre in general, with deeply unpleasant sequences being contrasted with deadpan jokes, comedy moments and unusual bizarre characters. It really creates an unusual texture unlike anything that's ever come before it really. Eraserhead is arguably one of Lynch's more out-there productions, and maybe Inland Empire or Twin Peaks potentially rivals it in terms of unusual and experimental pieces. And while I can't speak for everyone, I must say that when Lynch goes full Lynch, you're in for a damn good time, and this film is no exception. I first saw this production when I was 14 years old, and since then I've had the privilege of seeing this in a cinema setting twice out of the half a dozen times I've watched this film. And every time I go back to rewatch it, I always notice things I hadn't seen before, and I always come away with a slightly different feeling and interpretation. This time was no different. I decided on my latest viewing to view the film with a mind to disregarding the fatherhood interpretations, to try and interpret a new meaning out of the film. It was a nice challenge and a good way to try and view the film from a different angle. So with that in mind, after watching the film, I came to the conclusion that I thought it was a comment on the artist, the creative process, and its effects on the people around them. Here we find Henry, our artist, wandering a desolate wasteland. His girlfriend represents the idea as it was, and his child represents the idea as it is. Through the film, we see Henry constantly trying to get away from his baby just to spend some time by himself. And if we interpret his apartment as a metaphor for his own mind, it shows the struggle of an artist to distance himself from an idea that was successful in favour of finding something new. Lynch has said in the past that you should only nurture ideas you enjoy doing, and if you don't enjoy doing them, you shouldn't be doing them at all, which in many ways would back up this interpretation. If Henry's apartment is his mind, then in this sense the lady in the radiator would be an interpretation of inspiration, a small element of Henry's apartment, but is escapism as he's forced to accept that he is now the carer of this child or idea. A child or idea, in this case, that he may or may not be interested in developing any further. There are several other characters in this production. The woman in the apartment across from Henry's could be a metaphor for a new idea or viewpoint, and Henry's girlfriend's parents could be an interpretation of tradition and the way that established artists view how the creative process should be done. In this sense, the film quite quickly falls into place, with the pencil factory scene representing a major film studio or the film industry as a whole. This entire film becomes one big metaphor for the artist who gets an idea that makes him successful at the cost of his ability to branch out. He can no longer experiment or explore new avenues without being boxed into a specific field because of the idea that made him. In particular, there's a bit towards the end of the film where Henry's baby quite literally laughs at him for being fooled by the woman next door, and from this analogy that becomes a wonderfully bleak interpretation in which Henry's creation quite literally mocks him for his own inability to branch out, with the result of that being the ending of the film, which quite frankly I can't spoil for you, but certainly jarring enough to firmly ingrain itself in your mind for the foreseeable future. With this film having a 4-year production period, I wouldn't be surprised at all if after all that time the film wasn't just an amalgamation of several different ideas and points that underpinned Lynch's life at the time. And with this film being open to interpretation, it could well be the case that we may never actually know what Eraserhead means. But its impact on the world of film, cinema and art cannot be understated. This film and Lynch's shorts from around the time are disturbing, beautiful and unforgettable. This is the Citizen Kane of art house cinema, and if you haven't seen this film, you're really missing out.